Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 8. I know I've heard from you, and I've heard from other professors as well. There seems to be a systematic problem with Blackboard and not being able to get some of your assignments and not being able to get to the download, the signature page. Guys, my apologies. They are working on it. The good news is this: if you watch this video, then you're going to be okay. And I'm going to show you, exactly what you need to do for your assignments. And I'm actually just going to kind of give you one of your assignments and do it kind of for you in a way. So if you're having issues with Blackboard, it's not going to matter. Don't freak out. If you are having problems with Blackboard, I understand. I get it. They're working on it. But all you have to do, again, is watch this video. And if you do that and do as I say, you don't have to worry about Blackboard. Okay? So, hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend so far. Let's get to it. So the next thing is that in the video, if you can't get to it, it talks about Omar Epps. They do an interview with him. And Love and Basketball, I was really pleased when I started to teach this class that they interviewed him. The reason is that years and years and years ago, Love and Basketball came out, and I actually have a kind of attachment to the film, and I've seen the movie many, many times. It really is an amazing film. He's done a lot of other great work on ER, and he's a great actor. That movie, for personal reasons, it's extremely great. The man is also fluent in Spanish and French. He's been married for 15 years, has a great daughter and son, and he wrote this incredible book called From Fatherless to Fatherhood. And he really just talks about, look, even if you come from a home that didn't have a father, that doesn't give you an excuse not to be a great father yourself if you ever become one. And in the video, it does ask a question: who is it that he met? And there's been some problems and freezing, but he talks about meeting Sidney Poitier. And for those of you who don't know who this man is, or even if you do, it is kind of important, if you live in this country, which we do, to know who he is. And he is the first African American to win an Academy Award in 1964, which is what he's mostly known for. But here's what he also did. Believe it or not, it was not enough for him to win an Academy Award. He was an actor at a time where hiring African Americans would, you get death threats, which he did. I mean, it was just such a divisive time. We're living in a divisive time now, but, back then, the idea of hiring a person of color was just, what do you, I mean, it's just grab people by the throat with their fear, and they just really didn't like it. So he had to very much prove, does he still have the right to be here? Does he really, he's got to do something that not only no African American has done. What he then did, which was truly remarkable, is he did something that no other actor had ever done, regardless of their race. So in 1967, oh my goodness, yeah, that's a year that means something to me as well, which I won't say why. Um, he made 3 classics in the same year. Now, we've certainly have had actors who's made multiple classics. Dustin Hoffman, Kramer versus Kramer, and Lenny and Tootsie, and Al Pacino, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Godfather. I mean, Meryl Streep was Sophie's Choice, and, she was in Kramer versus Kramer as well. I mean, we certainly have had actors who've made multiple classics. We've never had an actor, before or since, that made 3 classic films in the same year. We've had actors who maybe have had 3 hits in one year, and even that's very rare. Jim Carrey was able to do that. But 3 classics in one year, no one before or since has ever done that in a leading role. And they were In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and To Sir with Love. Of course, you're not required to see any of these movies, but if you do, you'll be happy that you have. These films are better than 99% of the nonsense that we're watching right now on Netflix. So this is something that nobody had ever done. And so Omar Epps talked about how meeting him was a very meaningful event in his life because he's always been a mentor. And if you can't get access to the video, it's a really wonderful moment in the interview that Omar Epps went up to Sidney Poitier and said, I'm such a fan and you've influenced me and so forth. And Sidney Poitier said, I know who you are, Mr. Epps. And so Omar Epps understood in that moment that he was doing something right. He was doing something he needed to be doing for his career. And so this gets to the different kinds of psychology. And behavioral learning was what Omar Epps is talking about, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But in your Blackboard text and in what it is you're going to be reading about, let me just give you kind of an idea of what these things are. Yes, you need to read the web text, and yes, you need to become more familiar with it. I'm just going to give you some simple things here so you can kind of get off on the right footing. Sometimes when you start reading about something and you don't have any understanding about it, it's like, I don't have a grasp of it. Let me give you at least a grasp of these ideas. And then, read your web text because you're going to need to do that for your assignment. But let me at least give you, a quick and dirty viewpoint of these psychological principles because you're going to be writing about them. Okay? First, there's neuroscience. So just in the last few decades, we've had the ability to put a person into a machine, and I've had to do this as well. It actually makes some people very nervous because they're claustrophobic. And they can take pictures of your brain. Not just x-rays, but, CAT scans and MRIs and these things that I have become truly fascinated by. And it's really changed the way I view psychology completely. It's brainwave technology, which is very, very difficult to refute. It's very difficult to, argue that it's not valid because it's literal, chemical changes in the brain. And let me just give you an example of this. Drew Weston, one of the great scientists in the world, decided to look at the political brain. And basically what it says here, and I'm quoting from Science Daily, is that when people discuss politics, even the most academic and intelligent of people discuss politics, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. That's a part of the brain that is responsible for reasoning, for logic. That people who are Republican, that you can give them all the evidence in the world, they're just going to, defend their point of view, and people who are Democratic are not going to listen to any reason and going to defend their point of view. So it's almost impossible for people to now have a reasonable conversation or debate about politics, he found, because we've become so tribal. And people have always said, oh, I'm not tribal, I'm not addicted to my party, I'm not, I listen to reason, I look at both viewpoints. Well, he's finding from brain science technology that is not true. Now, that sounds very depressing because we are having lots of problems in this country, obviously. And we want people, obviously, to, regardless of whether they vote Republican or Democrat or Independent or whatever, to be logical and reasonable about how they vote. But he's finding that most people are not, that you just become addicted to your tribe. And he even found that, when people looked at photographs of their political idol or their political party, it was almost like they were having their fix. The brain showed the pleasure centers of the brain. It was almost like they're getting their drug fix. So, as depressing as that sounds, what do we do? Well, one of the reasons I teach these little classes and try to influence just a couple of people is maybe it's just good to be aware of that. Am I so addicted to my party, or am I so addicted to a certain point of view that I have shut down my prefrontal cortex? Am I able to look at facts? Am I able to listen truly to both points of view? Or do I only watch Fox News, or do I only watch MSNBC and, and just get the information that I already believe and not truly look at the whole picture? And this is not just true of politics. I've seen parents that will not listen to reason when it comes to their own children. Even when I show them the facts that their kids are addicted to drugs or what have you. We recently had a scandal in this country where parents were paying off people illegally to get them into Ivy League schools and these great schools, and now these parents are going to jail. They couldn't be reasonable. They couldn't turn on their reasonable brain. So that's an example of neuroscience, looking at the brain and how sometimes the brain chemistry controls our behavior, and we need to be more aware of how our brain works. Okay? And there's other evidence I've shown in other videos of things you can take, supplements and exercise and things you can do, meditation, to change your brain waves. Okay? Moving on. Evolutionary biology is a science, and evolutionary psychology is also a science. So I'm sure you're familiar with evolution, being in the medical field, but there's also something called evolutionary psychology. This is a photograph of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. If you don't know who they are, you can look them up. And they are very famous Western men who had that famous fight at the OK Corral. And let's say, for the sake of argument, you're related to Wyatt Earp. What an evolutionary psychologist would probably do is they would look at your entire history of your culture, your family, all the way back to Wyatt Earp and even before, to see how all these different things have led up to the person you are now. And they probably would look at your brain scan, and they probably would look at your heart rate and all these different things, but they would also look at the overall scope of the adaptations, as they call them, to see who you are. So I don't know the great-great-grandchild of, Wyatt Earp or where they are, but an evolutionary psychologist would say that what your ancestors did and the environment that they lived in would greatly influence who you are today. Right now, I'm speaking English as best I can, and that's because we live in an environment and all these different things happened in world civilization that led us to speak English. If I were speaking French, some of you would not understand what I'm saying because that's not the evolutionary psychology culture that we came from. So let's look at the full history of the biological and natural selection factors to determine who you are. All right? Behavior genetics. I've talked about these triplets several times. It's just an incredible example. Princeton University did this unethical experiment, but they did do it, where they separated these three boys, these triplets, and they put one in a lower middle class family, they put one in a middle class family, and they put one in an upper class family. And these three boys were not aware of their existence, of each other's existence, until college. And they bumped into each other by accident. And what these people at Princeton did is they said, okay, we're going to see how genetics or the environment is going to influence them. And at first, it looked like it was genetics. They wore the same clothing, they liked the same cigarettes, they wore the same clothes, and they liked the same kinds of women. But as they grew older, they saw that maybe they were trying so hard to find similarities between each other because they wanted to be, brothers. And their similarities were somewhat superficial. Yes, there were certain superficial similarities, but the internal, deep psychological personality traits were quite different. And unfortunately, one of them ended up committing suicide, and it was the upper class upbringing kid who did so. He did it as an adult. And the one who seemed the happiest came from the lower middle class family, from the poorest family, because the father was so loving and they called him Santa Claus. So their environments certainly had a huge factor on their upbringing. So what they found was it wasn't nature or nurture, it was both. But it probably was more the environment than anything else that influenced their behavior with this one experiment, which again, they shouldn't have done. They should have made these boys aware of each other. Psychodynamic. It was invented by Freud. Um, he talked about the id, the ego, and the superego. So, just for your own purposes, the id is our very primitive instincts, whether it's our sex drive or, the need to eat or the need to get revenge if somebody hurts us. The ego is our self esteem. And he talked about the superego, which is our conscience and the social standards by which we live, the ethics and morals that we have for ourselves. I'm going to not get into too much detail of the stages of development, but he believed that the stages of childhood development included the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stage. You can read more about those if you like, but just know that those are the stages. And I'll just give you one example. For instance, with the oral stage, you see babies putting things in their mouths all the time. So he said that's the oral stage. The criticisms of Freud is that he did recommend, prescribe, and take a lot of cocaine for himself. Back then, they obviously didn't know the harm of it, and there was a lack of empirical study. And psychodynamic therapists today certainly get often high ratings from their patients, but if you were to go receive psychodynamic therapy, the psychologist would most likely have you lay down and they would talk about your childhood and your feelings and how do you feel about your mom and how do you feel about your dad, and many people believe this is very, very helpful to them. And some people go to psychodynamic analysis for decades. They say that it really helps them discover who they are and why they behave the way they do. And this is a very, very short, quick and dirty definition of psychodynamic theory. Literally hundreds of books have been written about this very complex theory of psychology, highly influential. But these are the basics, okay? So at least you have a starting point where to bounce off of. Behavioral psychology, one of the things that you should know, like a trick question is who invented it? A lot of people say it's B.F. Skinner. It wasn't. John Watson invented behavioral psychology. So if you're ever on a game show and they ask you that question, just know that. It's a question that many psychology students miss. So John Watson invented behaviorism. B.F. Skinner, however, was kind of the champion of behaviorism. He was the one who said, okay, I didn't invent it, but I'm going to take this model of psychology and I'm going to test it. He actually went into the laboratory and tested it and got empirical studies behind it. Okay? And basically you have two types, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is really biological. You start to feed a dog, let a dog smell food, the dog salivates. Now, if you ring a bell right before you bring out the food, or you ring a bell at the same time that you give a dog food, eventually all you have to do is ring the bell and the dog will salivate. And salivation is not a voluntary behavior. So it's basically involuntary behavior that you can condition. There has been tests to show that somebody thought the stove was hot and they touched the stove and yet their hand was still burned. Okay? Operant conditioning is learned behavior that is very voluntary. It's voluntary behavior. It's got nothing to do with salivation or heart rate or being burned. It has to do with voluntary behavior. For instance, I'll pay you money if you go to work. All right? But behaviorism, let's go into it a little bit more. Punishment always reduces behavior. Okay? I'm going to give you a timeout if you don't stop yelling. So for you parents out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're trying to reduce the behavior. You want to reduce the yelling. Positive reinforcement is increasing behavior with a reward. I'll give you $5 to clean your room. Now, here's another question that a lot of people miss. Just about over 90% of people miss this on the test. They ask, does negative reinforcement increase or decrease behavior? Almost everybody says it decreases it because it has the word negative in it. Negative reinforcement increases behavior. But Todd, it's got the word negative in it. I know. But reinforcement is reinforcement. Reinforcement always means it increases the behavior. Now, how is it different than positive? Clean your room or you're going to get a timeout. So I'm going to increase my behavior cleaning the room to avoid a negative consequence. Okay? So those are the two types of reinforcement. And sometimes, like the military, They combine both. Clean your barracks, and you get to go on, your Saturday day off early. But if you don't clean your barracks quickly, you're going to give me 100 push ups. So the military will actually combine both positive and negative at the same time. Well, if I get my bed really clean and shine my boots, I get the day off on Saturday. And if I don't do that, not only do I not get the day off, I have to do 100 push ups. Okay, so they really pile it on. And the military can control their environment very, very well. So that seems to be very effective. Now, behaviorism is often as simple as ABC. Antecedent is what happens before. The behavior is behavior, and here's the consequence. Now, I couldn't get a photo of the actual kid, but I want to tell you a story, and I'm not exaggerating at all. The kid looked very much like him. This is just a photograph off of models from Google. But this is what the kid looked like. And I was at a party with professors and different people. This is years ago. And this woman came in and she brought her son with him because we told the people at this university party that you can bring your children because a lot of people don't want to hire a babysitter. And we had all these toys and all these different items on this table for the children, for the babies. And these kids, they're 3 and 4 years old or whatever. He was maybe 3. And they're playing. He runs over and he throws all the toys all over the place. Now, the mom, who was a rather strong, forceful lady, to say the least, grabs him by the arm and starts spanking him. How many times have I told you not to? I mean, to the point where I went, miss. I think he's got the point. He's going to kill this poor boy. No expression on his face. He's just. And, the adults are putting the toys back on the table. And she kind of like, I can't believe him. I don't know what I'm going to do with him. Blah, 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 blah. After we put the toys back on the table, he runs back to the table, throws it all on the floor again, and looks at her. Now, here's the question. Was spanking reinforcing to him, or was it a punishment? The spanking was positively reinforcing. But Todd, spanking's a punishment. It is for some kids. It wasn't for him. Because he engaged in the behavior again. It increased his behavior. The spanking did not decrease him throwing things on the floor. He did it again. But Todd, why would he do that? For you parents who are watching, you know exactly why. He got attention. The whole party stopped and would look at him. And she didn't spank him again. She just went, because she knew. She's like, Todd, what am I going to do? I said, spanking's not working. What he wants is attention. So you need to remove him from the party and give him no attention. Maybe a timeout would work. You have to figure out what's so different things are reinforcing to different people. Okay? People like certain things, people don't. For him, he had figured out, I'm going to get all the attention in the world. He controlled the room. Think about it. He's very clever. So, again, even if you think it's a punishment, it has nothing to do with what we think. It has to do with behavior. Did the behavior increase or did it decrease? A person the other day said, Todd, I don't want to do all these papers for this college. And I said, yeah, did you do them? Yeah, I did them. I said, well, you did want to do it. No, did you not hear me? I didn't want to do them. But B.F. Skinner would say the fact that you did the papers, even though you felt like not doing them, your feelings, forgive me, according to behaviorism, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this. I'm just saying that B.F. Skinner would say your feelings don't matter. In behaviorism, they don't care about feelings. They care about behavior. B.F. Skinner would say you did want to do the papers because you did them. The consequence of doing the papers is that you make an A, you get your degree, and you start making money. Now, you may not have enjoyed it, but you wanted to do it because you want the consequence of having a degree. So again, in behaviorisms, I'm sure that the kid loved the feeling of getting attention. I'm sure you love the feeling of getting a degree, but so many people, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But if you do it, you did want to do it. Okay, moving on. Behavioral schedules. Okay, this is very easy, believe me. Interval schedules would be like you get a piece of candy every 5 minutes. Now, you can't do that all day long, but let's just say every 5 minutes I give a kid a little piece of candy because they're being good. That's interval. It has to do with minutes or time. Ratio has to do with how often you do something. You get $1 after each time you finish a page of homework. So for every page of homework you do, I'll give you $1. So that's ratio. It hasn't, you could take as long as you want to get the page of homework done, but just whenever you're done. So that has to do with the number or the rate of your behavior. You can take all the time you want. It has nothing to do with minutes, hours, or seconds. It has to do with you completing something. Variable interval means that you don't know when something's going to happen, but when the bell rings, you get a 10-minute recess. Now, I'm not going to tell you when the bell rings, but you're just going to be, let's say kids are at school and you're teaching kids at school. Hey, kids, when I ring the bell, you're going to get a 10-minute recess. When are you going to ring the bell? I'm not going to tell you. That's variable. It's kind of random. But I have it set, like maybe it's going to be every 15 minutes, or maybe it's going to be every, 5 minutes, or maybe it's going to be 5, 10, So I have it maybe in my own mind when I'm going to ring the bell. But, they don't know what's going to happen. They're not doing anything. Variable ratio is gambling. It's the most powerful reinforcing schedule in the world. This is why Vegas makes billions of dollars. Well, they used to, maybe not now. But this is why gambling has made billions of dollars for centuries. And B.F. Skinner has said this is the secret to reinforcement if you want to make money. Variable ratio means, I take some dice, I'm rolling it, trying to win money at Vegas. I don't know when I'm going to roll a 7. Or I'm putting money in a slot machine. I don't know when. But if I keep doing it, I keep doing it, maybe eventually I'll hit the jackpot. Now, it has nothing to do with the slot machine is not set on a timer. It's not like every hour the slot machine goes to jackpot. It's not like when I roll dice, every hour the dice will roll a 7. That's variable interval. Variable ratio is just randomly, if it'll hit at a certain rate. Maybe the 2,000th person to put a coin in the slot machine is going to win the jackpot. Who knows? But the computers in the slot machines are set at random. And we don't know when roll dice. I could roll dice for 2 hours, maybe I'll hit a 7. Maybe I'll hit a 7 in 5 minutes. It has nothing to do with time. It has to do with just keep doing it. And eventually, of course, I'll roll a 7, but it has to do with the rate. But the point is, I am in control of how often I do something. I'm in complete control of how often I put a coin in the slot machine or how often I roll the dice. And I don't know when I'm going to hit a 7 or hit a jackpot. That's variable ratio. It's very reinforcing. Variable interval is I decide when I ring the bell and then you get a reward. But you don't know when I'm going to ring the bell. Variable ratio, you just keep doing something, keep rolling the dice, and you're going to keep rolling the dice. And maybe eventually you'll roll a 7. It's the most powerful reinforcing schedule on planet Earth. And the proof is Las Vegas. Gambling. That people will go to Vegas and hand over their money. Okay? Social culture. almost done, guys. This is looking at how the society and the culture influences your behavior. I'm from East Tennessee. I went to visit my uncle in Kingsport, Tennessee, and he wanted me to go pick him up something at Walmart. So I drive into the Walmart parking lot, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people in the parking lot. All of them, it was game day, all of them were wearing orange shirts because that's the color of the University of Tennessee volunteer football team. And it just hit me. This society, this culture worships football. They're all wearing the same kind of, orange shirt. And they're all saying, "Go Volunteers." And they're all, drinking kind of like pretty much the same kind of drink. And they're all driving pickup trucks. And I'm just like, social culture psychologists would say, this society, this culture has taught each other to be this way, to root for the football team, to wear these kind of colors. There's a social culture aspect, theory that is true here. And there's something to be said for it. Okay? So that's a quick and dirty of all the psychological principles of your assignment. And so please read about them as well. Here's part one of your assignment. Okay? Now I bolded the last part because this is so important. Be clear on which aspects from the perspective that you are most relevant to you. Discuss how this perspective claims your success as a college student and your future career success. Yes, I want you to do these other things that are in these perspectives. Discuss each one of their perspectives. But the main thing about the paper, how does this help you? How's this relevant to you? You're paying good money to be here. Be selfish. Tell me how it is relevant to you. Part two, again, you're going to choose one psychological perspective after you've analyzed them and tell me about them, or a social issue that's important to you. For example, teenage pregnancy, homelessness, drug addiction, public health, teenage illiteracy. Choose something that really means something to you and why it means so much to you and how writing about this helps you. And then all the other things, I'm not going to read this all here. It's in Blackboard, or you can freeze frame this if you're having problems with Blackboard. And get your paper done. All right? Now, if you are having problems with Blackboard, again, guys, simply email me your work. If you're not able to get to the Omar Epps interview, I hope you can. It's a great interview. But I gave you pretty much, what was in it. Then I understand. You don't have to write me and say you're not getting on. I get it. I will know if it's up or not because the tech people are working on it and they're going to let me know if it comes up or not. Okay? So just keep checking till the end of the week. But the main thing is, if you've watched this video, at least you have some idea about Omar Epps and his amazing work from his book. And if you're not able to upload your report by the end of the week, please give it to the end of the week. They should have it fixed by then. Then all you have to do is email me your paper. Okay, I will get it and I will grade it. It's okay. All right? So again, my apologies for the Blackboard. Hopefully this gives you a good starting point. Guys, hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Again, if you are still concerned or whatever, you can write me or email me. Talk to you soon.